next to the other, the human, well, I think this is a marvellous distinction to make, because we live in, times where it seems that all anybody wants to care about is the thing that's of the most use, and what they mean by that is makes the most money. People talk about those things as though we are a colony of ants and all we want is to be fed and watered, or live in a big house or whatever. Do ants live in big houses? I don't know. But the human in us requires more. The human in us requires storytelling. It requires connection between people. It requires music, requires art. Art matters. It matters so much. And I do understand the concerns of some in the community that somehow what we do in the humanities is frivolous. And maybe even some of what we do is frivolous, but what I do isn't frivolous. I am so invested in communities. I am so invested in art and what it brings to people and what it brings to enrich us and to inform us and to elevate us above just being a society of abstract transactions, monetary transactions. So I think what we do matters enormously. And in terms of developing us as humans and unlocking our human potential, what we do over here in the humanities is so vital. We've got a government, in fact we've got a whole world that lionizes the idea of the creative and the innovative, and that comes from community connections. It comes from being a human and being passionate about something. You can't just, innovate something up out of nowhere. You know what I mean? It comes from these connections. So even though we aren't able to explicitly articulate what our value is, our value in the humanities is astonishing. It's what makes us human.
For me, the humanities is anything to do with humans, what humans produce, what humans have wrought, if you will. What they think, what they feel. Anything to do with the study of humankind is relevant to the humanities, essentially. Look, if we are in a kind of society where there are issues with post-truth, where there are issues with why should the humanities even be around anymore, right? These two things go together, right? What the humanities will teach you how to do, and history especially, in those analytical kind of environments which teach critical thinking, what they will teach you to do is to engage sensibly and critically with information around you. And arguably, this is the greatest need that society at the present actually has.
If we think about the humanities in a traditional way, the Studia Humanitatis, then it's the case that they began as the study of human things. And what was especially human was living in societies that had a history and that had to engage in politics and had to survive with other societies. And so literature, history, diplomacy, rhetoric, these were the key arts that were taught, and philosophy wasn't essential at all to the humanities curriculum. So in our time, that's certainly changed enormously. Some of those disciplines are still there, of course, some are not. One thinks, for example, of rhetoric, which used to be a staple of university education, teaching people to speak well and to speak well about things that were important. We no longer see that as a part of our task. We no longer, for example, teach students how to write well. We no longer teach grammar, and that seems to have had large costs for our society. See Twitter. But on the other hand, the humanities still teach us multiple and diverse arts for cultivating ourselves as people with valuable skills, and so to that extent we have to continue to defend them.
I guess I see the humanities as a collection of a number of disciplines which sort of have come together historically. There are some uniting features, including sort of an interest in studying human societies and cultures and groups and individuals. Although for historical reasons, things such as the study of human bodies is often in biology or psychology. The statistical analysis of large groups of people is often done in the social sciences. But I don't necessarily see those boundaries as being so strict as such, but there is a sense in which the humanities are a number of areas in which people are studying human beings and their interaction with each other and their cultures and societies through the study of sort of the representation of their own human experiences, if I could put it that way, through their music, through their writings, through their discussions and activities of various other sorts.
I think the question of what are the humanities is really interesting in Australia, because I think there are national differences as well, and I think that's something that you and I probably see quite a bit because we work in quite an international, with quite a different group of international people. I'm always conscious when I'm talking to American academics that to be a humanist is a kind of job description and identity that makes sense to them, and that's because of the American system of sort of education and civics and a sort of a genuine belief that reading good books will make you a better citizen and a better person. And I think that argument plays out in different ways in different places. I think in Australia we're a little bit cynical about that, and I think partly as an academic who's grown up through the period of critical theory, in many ways we deconstructed that notion that reading a good book would make you a good person.
When I'm asked what I do and I say studies in religion, that usually is followed by an eloquent silence. But if I'm asked to elaborate, I guess I say something along the lines of religion is a really important phenomenon in human life. It's hard to understand what it is to be human without having an understanding of the religiously human and what it means to be religious. At one end, therefore, it's a study of the way religion functions in society. At the other end of town, I guess it's a set of philosophical questions about the existence of God, the problem of evil, the meaning of life, all those traditional questions that we used to think philosophy dealt with, except that we do it in religion on a broader scale. So we're interested not only in the way in which those questions are dealt with in the West, but also in the East, in the traditions of Buddhism and Hinduism and so on.
The human element kind of pervades, the humanities as well as the sciences. I think the humanities seeps into kind of, broader discourses and broader inquiries of the world around us. I don't think we can really kind of restrict or our understanding of the humanities as in just a field, I suppose. I think it's all pervasive really as far as the human's concerned.
So I'm coming from both a biomedical perspective as well as a history perspective, having been trained in both disciplines. And I guess from the sciences, I think there's a big attempt to kind of remove human subjectivity from their analysis. So a biomedical science would try to understand truth or reality without necessarily the human subject involved. Whereas I think my understanding of the humanities is almost the complete opposite. It's almost embracing human subjectivity and understanding that is crucial to analysing world problems or contemporary problems or issues, and really understanding the intricacies of that subjectivity, which I think sometimes can be a little bit lost in the sciences, or at least my experiences of them.
The fundamental and most significant problems for our society today are problems that the humanities, if any part of the academic world, command. Now, our society is not as significantly threatened by climate change, by the robot apocalypse, by the zombie robot apocalypse. It's not as significantly threatened by the rise of China or the rise of Russia or the structural changes to our economy that are associated with automation, with machine learning. It's not as significantly threatened by any of those things as it is by the loss of civil discourse. And the reason it's not, the reason that's the most important thing, is you can't solve any of those other problems if you don't have a foundation in civil discourse, if you don't have a public sphere in which people of diverse opinions can address one another in a civil way, seeking some kind of solution to these problems. Now, what's that got to do with humanities? Well, the humanities tell us how to do those things. That's what the whole history of the humanities has been about, both before and after their disciplinarization in the 19th century. The humanities have been concerned with making people conscious of other points of view, with opening up different worlds of feeling and thought.
I'm drawn to history because of its human dimension. You know, that the human creature, in all its foibles, in all its complexities, is a fascinating subject for study. And I think my mind works in a way that draws me to history, because I think I have a sense of context and I have a sense of environment, and why particular periods look and feel different to other periods. So I think I've always had a bit of a sense of historical change and how context is important in measuring that kind of change. But as far as what the human being is doing and all of that, I don't really have a set view in this notion that, you know, humanity has a nature and that the nature is in some sense essential to all human beings everywhere. I know that's an important kind of premise, that all human beings are worthy of dignity and respect and rights. But it's not something that I think drives my kind of historical work, because you're always struck by how flexible and malleable and changeable human conditions are. And so one of the mistakes people can make about the past is they can assume that people in the past are thinking and behaving much as we do now. You know, that problem of present-mindedness is a real issue in historical study. You've got to be prepared, or you've got to attempt to surrender the kind of expectations of the present and really listen to the evidence of the past. It's only when you're listening to the evidence that you can start to piece together what was actually going on.
The human itself is not defined, I think, in any kind of zoological way. So, I mean, it's not like, you know, we're not fussing about the difference between humans and apes. We are supposing that there are things, supposing rightly, you know, that there are things that are characteristic of humans that aren't shared by any other kinds of creatures, and there are forms of thinking and talking and writing and producing pictorial art and whatever that are characteristic that we should try to know about, and that we can know about in different ways, you know.
I'm not interested in humanities scholarship for the sake of scholarship. I don't think antiquarianism is a valid social defense of the humanities. The missing question and the missing answer is always, why does the past matter? And if you can't demonstrate that and you don't make it a part of your work, then I don't see why students should be interested in it. There is, I mean, this is a cliche phrase that Marx loved, but question everything, you know, that sounds like just teenage angst, but it should be true. It should be true of humanities scholarship in particular. They should question the value of their own practice and make defending the present day relevance of what they're studying a part of their work, a part of their classes. And if they don't, and students aren't interested in what they're doing, it's not because the students are stupid or lazy or spending too much time on Facebook. It's because I think they've sold the humanities short.
I had a wonderful experience when I was at uni. Somebody in one of my first year classes said, "Well, but what's the answer?" And the rather snooty professor answered back, "Well, if you want the answers, Mr. Jones, you should go to Harvard. They have all the answers there. What we have here are the questions." So that's a kind of an intrinsic part of humanities education, is that we've got a lot more questions than we've got answers. That doesn't mean that you can't find answers as an individual student, as an individual person, but you're going to have to make them yourself, and you're going to have to make them from materials that don't point uniquely in the direction of an answer, even for you.